Welcome back to the Sharing English podcast, where we explore stories from the English-speaking world, spoken slowly and clearly for curious English learners like you. Let's get started. Hello, I'm your host, Freya. In this episode, we're taking a closer look at a complicated figure in world history, Christopher Columbus, and the evolving way Americans remember him. Every October, the United States observes Columbus Day, or in many places, Indigenous Peoples Day. These holidays tell very different stories about the same historical moment. When European explorers first crossed the Atlantic and met the peoples who had lived in the Americas for thousands of years. So who was Columbus really? Why do we celebrate him? And what does it mean when a country rethinks who it honors? To understand Columbus, we need to imagine the world of the late 1400s. European nations were growing in wealth and ambition. Portugal and Spain were leading a new age of exploration, sailing farther than ever before. Their goal was trade, especially in spices, gold, and luxury goods, and to find new routes to Asia that bypassed rival empires and dangerous overland journeys. Christopher Columbus was an Italian mariner from Genoa. He studied navigation and dreamed of reaching Asia by sailing west across the Atlantic, rather than east around Africa. After years of rejections, Spain's monarchs, King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, finally agreed to sponsor his voyage in 1492, hoping to expand Spain's power and influence and spread Christianity. When Columbus reached land after months at sea, he believed he had reached islands near Asia. In fact, he had arrived in the Bahamas and later explored parts of the Caribbean, including modern-day Cuba and Hispaniola. He never set foot in what is today the United States. The islands Columbus reached were already home to thriving civilizations, the Taino, Arawak, and other indigenous peoples with rich cultures, languages, and spiritual traditions. At first, interactions were mixed. Some trade, some curiosity. But soon, violence and exploitation followed. Columbus and his men forced indigenous people into labor, took captives, and claimed land for Spain. Diseases carried by Europeans, smallpox, influenza, measles, spread rapidly among native populations with no immunity to these foreign diseases. Historians estimate that within 2 centuries, that's 200 years, up to 90% of indigenous peoples in the Americas died from disease, war, and enslavement. This period of exchange of people, animals, crops, and ideas is now called the Columbian Exchange. It transformed the world, connecting continents for the first time in history, but it also began centuries of colonization and suffering for native peoples. Over time, Columbus became a symbol, not just a historical figure. To many Europeans, he represented discovery, courage, and the start of the modern world. Statues and holidays celebrated him as a hero who, quote unquote, discovered America. Even though indigenous peoples had lived here for tens of thousands of years, and Norse explorers, namely Leif Erikson, had reached North America centuries earlier. In the United States, Columbus became part of national identity. His name appears everywhere. Columbia is the poetic name for America. Columbus, Ohio, Washington, D.C., which stands for the District of Columbia. Cities, rivers, and schools across the country bear his name. But there's a lesser-known story behind Columbus Day itself. In the 1920s, the Ku Klux Klan, one of the most violent white supremacist groups in U.S. history, was trying to shape America into a white Protestant nation. While they primarily terrorized Black Americans, they also targeted Catholics, Jews, and immigrants. At that time, an organization called the Knights of Columbus, a Catholic fraternal group, faced slander and attacks from the Klan. To combat the prejudice, the Knights promoted Columbus, an Italian Catholic, as a patriotic American hero. They argued that Catholics and immigrants had also contributed to building the nation. Their campaign gained support especially among Italian Americans. In 1934, President Franklin D. Roosevelt declared Columbus Day a national holiday, in part to recognize the diversity of American society. Later, in 1971, it became a fixed federal holiday on the second Monday in October. So, Columbus Day began as both a celebration of inclusion and a response to bigotry. An ironic and complex and very human story. In the past few decades, though, a growing number of states and cities have replaced or joined Columbus Day with Indigenous Peoples Day, a holiday that recognizes the history, cultures, and resilience of Native American peoples. Today, at least 17 states and the District of Columbia officially observe it. For many, this shift isn't about erasing history, but telling it more truthfully, acknowledging both the achievements and the harms of exploration and colonization. Historians remind us that history and commemoration are not the same thing. History seeks truth about what happened. Commemoration reflects the values we choose to celebrate today. The story of Columbus is really the story of how we understand our past. He lived in a world of expanding trade and empire that changed the globe forever. His voyages connected continents and reshaped history, but also unleashed destruction and displacement that still echoes today. Historians note that uncovering difficult parts of our past isn't about disrespect, it's about understanding how societies change and how patterns from history can help us make better choices today. Societies grow when they face uncomfortable facts, not when they rewrite them. Understanding Columbus means holding both truths, the courage of exploration and the tragedy of conquest. When we rethink who we honor, we are really asking, what kind of society do we want to be? In the 1920s, Columbus represented immigrant pride and unity. Today, honoring Indigenous peoples represents truth, healing, and inclusion. History changes as we do, not because the past changes, but because our understanding of it deepens. Now I'm curious, do you live in a place that celebrates Indigenous Peoples Day or Columbus Day? What does that mean to you? And how do you think we should remember the past? Thank you for listening to the Sharing English podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love it if you'd subscribe, leave a rating or review, and share the podcast with a friend who's also learning English. You can find out more about me and the podcast at our website, www.sharing-english.com. New episodes of the Sharing English podcast are available weekly wherever you listen to podcasts. As always, let me know, what topics are you interested in hearing more about? Until next time, keep listening, keep learning, and keep sharing English.